next speaker is Pedro Alves, presenting some new features from Pentaho 7.
I think
Thanks
so.
for being here.
20 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That will work out. All right, cool. So, hello everyone. I'm Pedro. I'm from Portugal, and I woke up extremely early. So if I don't make sense, blame it on that, because most likely I won't. So I'm going to talk about 7.0, and I'm going to try do this in the following way. I will try to talk a little bit about the positioning of Pentaho, what's our approach in general for this business analytics data integration. Then I'm going to show what we did in 7.0 to go against that overall vision. Then I'll probably run out of time somewhere, and then I will say that I actually had an amazing demo, but I won't get there. But let's just play it out. So Gartner stuff that says that we'll have a lot of data to process. Yeah, right. We all know that. So skipping that part. This is how you see the market shaped these days. We have IT. For some reason, IT is always on the basement. I don't know why they put these things this way, but we have IT, so we have that data integration side of things, a data prep layer, business analytics, and then the business users in that heaven, just looking down on everyone else and things like that. And usually all the market is split into these three different areas. We all can name a couple of tools that live here. We all can name a couple of tools that live on the business analytics side. Relatively recently, I'm tripping on my tongue, that happens before I drink. Anyway, there's all that data wrangling stuff that appears lately. So we have those guys trying to convince everyone that we don't need data integration and we don't need pure analytics, which it's a lie. But anyway, what we do is basically take a different approach to this. We think that it makes no sense to think of the data integration without thinking of the business analytics side of things. So we're trying an approach where we try to look at those from the same angle. The way that we address these projects is that regardless if we are a data engineer from an IT perspective or if we're a business analytics, these are just two different perspectives over the ecosystem of data. And that's what we're trying to do, to split something that historically has been the approach, which is a certain persona uses a certain tool and DTL users use something completely different, into a way where we're trying to abstract the tools and just let whatever persona use whatever makes more sense for them. We really think this is the approach. We have internally, we use a lot the concept of a power user, which is a user with more power. Anyway, but that means that it's a user that can be a data scientist, can be a data integration user. But one of the things that we've seen, that concept of power user that exists in all organizations, sometimes means a user that feels more comfortable living on the data layer. Sometimes it's a user that feels more comfortable in consuming the data on the other end. So there's not even an agreement of what a power user should be. For us, this means that just locking people on a certain domain is not the best approach. So we're trying to move away from that a little bit. And the way that we're trying to do this, like I said, is move away from these silos that were imposed just because that's how we started to think about things historically, and think about this more as a flow, where the data goes from the ingestion side of things, processing, blending, all the way through the delivery. Our goal with this is to make sure that we alleviate the need to have different tools to focus on each of these stages. Make sure that our first approach to this, and this is something that it's available starting in 7.0, but it's something that we'll be pursuing, is making sure that we allow people to access analytics at any point of this stage, and I will show that. The third one is that this only makes sense if we are able to do this in a governed way and regardless of the data sources. So it is true that Today, there is the need to play well with big data sources, regardless of the cluster providers, whatever, but making sure that it gets to a point that when someone is consuming, it's just data, and we have to make sure it gets there properly and in a governed way. When I mean governed, I mean things like lineage, security, making sure the data is correct, versus just handing out a bunch of information and let the user come to their own conclusions, which is the huge challenge in just having the pure business analytics side of things, where it's the user that has to take their own conclusions. One of the big features in 7.0 is the ability on the data integration side, is the ability to analyze data anywhere. And the goal and the reason for that is a lot of times it's very difficult to get insights just by looking at pure raw data. We are very used, while using PDI, the ones that you used historically, we just press play, process the transformation, fix all the errors that, all the mistakes that we did, and then we'd see a table of data, which is fine, but it's very hard to digest once we start getting a lot of it. Most of the times, and I'm sure this has happened to anyone that has tried to do a project like this from end to end, we do everything just in the end to forget that we processed the data set twice, or we forgot a full year of data, because only at the business analytics side of things we were able to get that aggregated view of things. The goal in here is to try to anticipate that as much as possible to the origin, because while developing these transformations, these flows, only in the end, only when someone says that this is right, is that we know that we're finished. So we're trying to increase that collaboration. Never letting go of features that allows us connectivity and scalability. There's increased support for Spark in 7.0, and this is a topic that will come up a lot more as we're going along. Metadata injection, Hadoop security, increased support for that kind of technologies, and admin simplification. I will describe a little bit of this. I won't describe a lot, or else Jens will have no presentation. So what I mean about visual data experience is that right now in PDI, and the goal is, I'll just skip through some of these, is that in PDI we'll be able to explore visually the data that we have. I can show a little bit of that, but basically we'll be able to explore in different ways the data that we see. It's not all the data, we're not trying to, I mean, we can just connect to a huge data lake and try to extract 5 petabytes, so this is not about replacing the analytics within the PDI environment by any means. That wouldn't even make any sense. It's just giving tools to spot check the data. So what we do is ingest a bunch of data, and we have things like sampling steps if we want to take this to a greater extent, so that we can get conclusions right as we're playing with the data, without the need to materialize, without the need of even thinking about any of that, just getting to the conclusion that we're on the right track. And we offer a bunch of possibilities for us to do that. One of the things that we are also doing here can be pivot tables or charts with the kind of features that one would expect from these kind of tools. We're not reinventing the wheel here. One of the things that we would like to highlight, because it's clear that one of the goals that we have in here is simplifying our own stack. Each of you that understands Pentaho knows that it's a consequence of going end to end. It can be relatively complex to try to master all of these different areas of these projects. So we're trying to consolidate everything in a coherent experience and try to bring the knowledge of the information closer to the source. So not only we shouldn't think of PDI as something that plays with data. As we start interacting with data, we should also add the business information that will allow us to get the true value of the information that we have. I will explain a little bit what that means later. This is just an example of a concrete, a real use case that we had. We were parsing, I think this was actually election data, I don't know, but looking at the table, at just the raw data, everything seemed okay. Once we translated that into a chart, it was immediate that we were missing some states in order to process. This could, if we didn't detect this at this stage, we would actually wait for some customer or some end user to complain that something is wrong. And we all know that every time that happens, we lose credibility, we lose time, ultimately everyone loses money with these kind of mistakes. So we also want to increase that collaboration effort. So at any point in time, and this ties into what Kessler was describing about the data services, which is some insanely powerful way of handing out data to end users without the need of materializing databases, worrying about schemas. We can immediately make this available to the end users from the right from within this environment once we get to the conclusion that this is working as we want. So, and basically what we're trying to do ultimately, and I'll just skip through it or I'll completely run out of time, is to reduce the round trip between working with the data and delivering the data to the end user. We are not skipping any process. We're just trying to get all the questions and raised as earlier as possible on the cycle. On 7.0, we increased a lot on the big data ecosystem. Some of you surely know that Pentaho has a strong presence in big data. We try to abstract things like distribution, so you can use Cloudera, you can use Hortonworks, MapR, without having to think about the specifics of each one. And this is an ongoing effort because the technologies on those areas are rapidly changing. One of the recent things that has a lot of noise and actually less adoption on the enterprise than the noise that we hear about that is Spark, but still extremely good for data science and exploration. We can now have, this is one area that improved a lot in 7.0, Hadoop security and metadata injection. Advantages on this, I won't dig into this a lot, but faster processing than MapReduce makes real time. Too bad that all that thing about commodity hardware just went out the sky, because yeah, you can do that in memory, you just need something with 1 petabyte of memory, so fine. And we all know the challenges in these things. It's even hard to keep up with what the names mean, let alone how to work with those things. Spark orchestration is improved, now support for Scala, Map, MLlib, and some other things. So Spark SQL included on 7.0, extended support for Spark's streaming on top of the already supported stuff. Blah blah blah. Sales stuff, marketing side. Let's go through it. One important thing for enterprises that leverage big data clusters a lot is the ability to do impersonation. Right now, every time that we trigger something to be executed, we can now map whatever user in Pentaho or group in Pentaho, trigger the execution to whatever group that should be executed under on the cluster. So that ability to do impersonation is fundamental in terms of resource management and allocations, permissions, and lineage. This may seem obvious, and I mean, well, that why isn't that from the beginning? But the reason for what makes this an insanely hard challenge is that from the start, when Apache started with the Hadoop project, they kind of, I mean, university, so they thought security was not something that you should think about. So that means that every distribution solved the security problem their own way. Cloudera as what, Jens?
Record service.
Record service, Hortonworks as Nox and Ranger, Cloudera Sentry, Mapr as just, you know, and ultimately it's Kerberos under the hood, but it's so different that our goal, since our goal is to abstract, means that we have to take on all of that complexity. So this is an ongoing process to make sure that we can adhere to all the security standards on the companies. Metadata injection is something that tries to make the challenge of doing things like onboarding from totally distinct data sources into a data lake something more manageable. Basically, since PDI, basically that guy, thought that this shouldn't be a compile time engine, we basically can change the transformations on demand to make sure it adapts to different inputs into coherent outputs. You got that one right, so I have to tell you. Jens will speak more through this. I'm completely out of time, right? Oh, cool. Bunch of steps that support in 7.0, you don't want to do that. And something that's important in order to do this. So historically, if you've been around Pentaho, you know that we had the BA server and the DI server. One for analytics, one for data integration. We've been doing a constant effort, and actually this was released to the community in 6.1, to just think about these things as one Pentaho server. It will make sense in a lot of cases to have different installations, optimized for different use cases, but it only makes sense for us to pursue, or at least it was like a pet peeve for me. I never understood internally why we said that BA and DI are better together, but then we had a BA server and the DI server that were separate. You know? So finally we were able to actually change that, and now we come to a conclusion. I'll jump very quickly to this kind of demo that I think I had in here as soon as I can just press escape on this thing. Stop and show. Which is basically just to quickly show how this materializes on when you use the product, or at least how we can start thinking about these things. You get to Pentaho, and these are the main components: the data integration, PDI, and the Pentaho server. And when I say that, this is the new theme that you'll be seeing more. When I say that they share the same, they are different views over the same thing, what I mean by that is that regardless if you decide to be on one side or the other, you will always be seeing the same view over both. So in here you have the kind of structure that you have is exactly the same as you do from the other side. And this greatly increases the round trip in between both ends. So when we execute a transformation here, and this is a transformation that I used for some demo for a customer recently, and without going a lot into details, what we did is just prepare the data. This data set is not is not very big actually, it's insanely small, but we were able to at any point in time just get views over this data without materializing, just doing this kind of analysis right from here, and be able to get some insights as we play with the data. We paid a lot of attention while doing this to not here, what I want. to how these things work. So things like making sure that we optimize spaces. Anyway, if I start talking about that, yeah, you will throw me out the window. But basically the goal in here is that we are also able to, at any point in time, just decide to make this available so that so that this transformation and this source of data is immediately exposed from the server side. So this data source that we just saw in here is exactly the same, okay, as we see in here. So if we do things like just group, brand, year, boom, 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 it's exactly the same as looking at this from this side, and this really increases the ability for us to reproduce issues, divide other features and things like that. Also, by publishing these single data sources, then we can build on top of that. And one of the things that I used just by using these unmaterialized, very relatively easy to communicate, is just leveraging all the other areas of our stack. One of them that I'm relatively attached to is all the specific dashboards that allows us to just display data in any way that we want, in any visuals that we want, and all of this is using the ctool stack, using exactly the same data source, but with very specific visuals, with any behavior that's, well, that basically we want implemented in here. I don't have internet, but there was a component that would get data from a social media, get related articles in there, and anyway. It wasn't actually that bad.
Thank you, Pedro.